um, I'm not sitting here saying, let's have this, lunchtime conversation every single day about death and grief or anything like that. But it's something that it's pushed to the back, it's pushed to the side. I think partly because lack of awareness, but partly because it is uncomfortable. But as far as how it impacted me as a child, obviously it's retrospect.
Awe Genge, this is Mental Mythos, hosted by Asekho Toto. Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Mental Mythos. I'm your host, Asekho Toto, and before we dive into today's incredible conversation, I have a small favor to ask. If you enjoy what you hear today, please take a moment to rate and review our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Your feedback not only helps us improve, but also helps others discover the valuable insights we share every week. And if you find today's episode particularly inspiring or insightful, don't forget to share it with your friends, family, or anyone you think could benefit from it. Thank you for your support. It truly means the world to us. Now, let's get back into our conversation.
Losing a loved one is something that is horrifying and able sometimes, as I've said, that people find it difficult to cope with, because it's something also that I also experienced in terms of losing loved ones. So
I'm so sorry.
no problem. It's something that I'm still working on, and as I've said, through our conversation, hopefully you will provide things that might be helpful not only for me but also for the audience out there who are actually in the driven stages in terms of considering in their life, because it can lead to things that it can lead to suicide per se, because all the emotions, all more especially when you were depending on that certain person in your life, and imagine that person has been taken away from you. So my first question, I just wanna first touch on your early life. So can you tell us about your early childhood and how it was shaped by the traumatic event of your dad's murder?
Absolutely. I mean, all I remember is my dad being gone, that my dad was murdered. That sounds dramatic, but what I mean is I don't have any memories without that, because I was only 2 years old when he was murdered. And so it's a lot of people are like, oh, you're so lucky. You don't miss him. You missed, you didn't feel that shock. You don't remember feeling that shock when it happened. And I found out years and years later that was not the case. Little teeny kids, that trauma is real, even if they're a baby. My brother was 8 months old, and he has experienced trauma, as he found out through therapy and things like that, as a direct result to our dad's murder.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think it's just the knowing that being raised in that kind of this might sound kind of funny, but I think it just kind of gives you a different perspective growing up. Bad things happen to good people from the very foundational age. So
I would say that it gives you that glimpse of adulthood in terms of what to expect in me, and also when you look things in a different perspective. It's something that I've seen within my journey of learning more about mental health. What actually mental health means is more about perspective. As much as you are offered, you are dealt with the card that you are dealt with, but it depends on how you react to that. Not sit down and solve over it and saying that. So it's something that I feel like something that, again, we're gonna touch on in terms of self-doubt, in terms of that self-worth, of not recognizing yourself, that you seeing yourself worthless, as I've said I've seen on your bio on Hotmatch. And something that I believe that I should have started with. It's something that really catched my eye when I was reading your bio, whereas it said that I'm not afraid to talk about my past, because every time I do, it opens the door for others to face and overcome their trauma. And it's something that is really powerful because I also believe in that because people out there are afraid to talk about their trauma. People out there are afraid to be in terms of discharge or be judged or they, and also I feel like trauma has this, I feel like this effect in terms of this black child in terms of we shouldn't talk about it. It actually it's a stigma in over we shouldn't talk about it. Will trigger some people in terms of that. But if I don't talk about it, who will? If I don't talk about it, how will I get past that? It's something that as individuals we don't take a look at. So in terms of you having this trauma, how did you how did living in constant state of fight or flight affect your mental health growing up?
Oh, horribly. Absolutely horribly. I will give this disclaimer. I was raised in a very, very loving home. My mom is an absolute angel on earth. My stepdad, she remarried when I was 6. So my dad was killed when I was 2. She remarried when I was 6 to a wonderful. My stepdad is wonderful. So I do want to just put that out there that I did have a very warm, supportive upbringing. But at the same time, one thing that you were saying is you're like, people don't like to talk about it. And I'm not sitting here saying let's have this, lunchtime conversation every single day about death and grief or anything like that. But it's something that it's pushed to the back. It's pushed to the side. I think partly because lack of awareness, but partly because it is uncomfortable. But as far as how it impacted me as a child, this obviously this retrospect. I remember growing up terrified. Like anytime my mom would leave the house, death was very, very, very first and forefront on my mind. I was afraid of my death. I was afraid of anybody else's death, little animals that I cared for. It was just such a terrifying thing for me because it was so real. And I was in my mid-30s when I was diagnosed with complex PTSD.
Mm.
And, as I've been doing my research, as I've been doing my writing, as I've been connecting with people, and like you said, I'm here to tell my story because I want other people to know that they have the right to those feelings. I've realized that a lot of people, they suppress it, but they feel the same way that I did. And it's just, the fight or flight is it's a natural reaction. That's what I'm looking for. It's a natural reaction to a traumatic event because it's like your brain, it's a physical thing where you're there until you feel safe. So did that answer your question?
Yeah, it definitely did. And I feel like there is not enough safe, I will say, safe, safe, safe place for individuals that feel like in that cage of what if I tell someone about this, how would they feel? How would they react? One thing that I realized in terms of people dealing with mental health, the only thing that they need is someone that they could listen to, someone that people that they can listen to how I actually feel, not something that someone that will give me advice. Okay, how about we take this route and this and this and this. Something also I experienced, and it's something that I realized that at some point people when I talk about my story also is the fact that they have this urge of wanting to assist in a way of playing the hero character in a way, but sometimes not about that, but it's about listening. It's about acknowledging that I have these certain feelings and I just want you to listen. And it's something that is quite rare of people actually actually listening to you. It's something that I've seen, and it's something that I try by any means to educate people about. And it goes back to that thing. I work at a disability unit here in Nelson Mandela University, whereas one of the things that we talk about is in terms of assisting people. Sometimes you shouldn't just go assist. Just first, you just need to ask if they are comfortable or not. And when it comes to this conversation, most of the time they're sensitive. They are very uncomfortable. And some people that when you talk about those things, as I've said, that people are actually scared to talk about it. And there is this thing of saying that if I tell you my story and a certain person says that no, bro, this is uncomfortable. This conversation that we have is uncomfortable. So I feel like some people are not ready to have those uncomfortable conversations in a way of not seeing that as much as I'm talking about I'm talking about my story. It's a way of trying to move past it. It's a way of trying to just move on and realize that I can sometimes healing can come from talking to other people. Healing can come from just in a way telling your story. I would say telling your story. I would say that. So yeah, you can say.
Oh no, go ahead.
I was in terms of going into the impact of trauma, something that I feel like I really, really resonate with in terms of it. And I would say that trauma has also impacted me in a way of, um, there was this one time back in 29, 2017 actually. I was still in high school, whereas I almost got stabbed in a way, and someone that certain person ran away, and something that really in the in the next in the few 2 to 3 years, I had this feeling that I didn't want to forgive that person. I had still had that rage, that immense rage. So how did in your own, how did knowing that your father's killer was out there, how did it make you feel emotional and mental?
Well, I found out that I was afraid that he was at large my whole life, and I thought that it was irrational. But I didn't find out that he really was at large until when was it? Like maybe around the same time, 2017. I don't know. It was while I was in the process of writing my book, actually. The Navy kind of covered up the information. They wouldn't let us know what happened to the guy who killed him. They just, he was murdered. Here's the situation. Boom. Give us limited information. And then I had to do some digging. And as I got older and I was ready to learn more about my dad's death and find out more about what happened, I reached out to the Navy and they stonewalled me. So I had to take matters into my own hands and do a lot of research. So long story short, I found out through some phone calls, it's a lot of this is in my book, and so there's things that I can't really share. But I found out that he was at large while I was writing my book, and so I felt very betrayed by the Navy when I found out that he was really actually at large. There was some fear, but at the same time, having an idea of where he was or I didn't know where he was, but having an idea that subconscious fear that I had carried that he could come out of nowhere and come find us was true. It's mixed emotions. It really is. I think it's a very vulnerable feeling. If you don't mind my asking, did you lose a loved one to homicide? I know you've gone through your own loss, or have you experienced loss from homicide?
No, actually, it was natural causes.
Oh, I'm so sorry. But still, and it doesn't matter the way. It doesn't matter. It still leaves that hole in the heart. It's still, yeah. But the homicide. Well, if you don't mind, a little tangent. Can I share a story through TAPS? Okay. So there's this military organization which you're aware of, but your listeners, it's called Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors. It's called TAPS, and they have seminars to help people who fall in military, who just to grieve or to honor or remember their loved ones. But they have these seminars, and they also have different breakout groups. And I went to this breakout group for homicide victims, and it was just so interesting because I'm sorry if you hear my dogs barking in the background. So sorry. Anyway, okay. But I walked into the room and the feeling was just so heavy. It was like, it didn't look any different. You just could feel the darkness that these people carried with them. That might sound a little bit weird, but there's just a different feel to when somebody deliberately takes your loved one. That kind of gives you an extra level of fear. Especially if they haven't been caught, if they're out there. It's like they hated your loved one, they hate you too. and there's a lot of different irrational, but a lot of different thoughts that will go through your mind. I mean, that was one thing growing up was I didn't know what happened to my dad's killer. I knew that he was murdered. But like I said, I mean, there was a subconscious fear going, well, where are the news articles? What happened to him? Why don't we know what happened to him? And my mom didn't know. So we just lived life. And, back to kind of what you're saying, people are uncomfortable talking about things. And another thing is it's like, get over it already. Move on. It happened. There's something wrong with you if you're not over it within 2 months. You know what I mean? So there's that combination of the stigma where I just left it alone. And then when I found out that he really was at large, it was very, very scary. Like, why wouldn't he come after me? Especially when he found out that I was, if he were to find out that I was writing my dad's story, which I was very public about it for a while. So.
Mm. And it's something that really something that we don't look at per se. When something that you actually mentioned is the fact that in terms of getting over it. One thing that people misunderstand about grief is the fact that it's an ongoing process. It's a cycle that keeps on going, a cycle that keeps on going. And you can't, especially when that certain person you really loved and you really had that relationship with them and that close relationship, it's something that it's quite hard because I also, in terms of on my side, also I'm still having the effects of in terms of grief. I'm still going through the things, and and I try by any means to in terms of trying to go move past it, and definitely, while in terms of your your process of writing the book, didn't you have those thoughts of breakdown? Didn't you have those breakdowns in terms of writing the book of remembering your father in a way?
Well, that's the thing that is really it it's part of my target audience is people who don't remember their loved ones. Like, it's so complex and it's simple yet complex. You think of grief, you think of, like you're saying, the memories, not having them there when you're used to having them there. My little brain, no memories at all, but that feeling, that connection was still there. It was, and I'm a very spiritual person. I'm a religious and spiritual person. And I'm not trying to say that to, set anybody apart because a lot of my friends are agnostic atheists. I feel like one of the reasons I'm writing this book is to give people permission to grieve and to love and to have relationships, even if they think that they're not entitled to. Because, back to your question where, how was it for me? I missed him. I didn't miss him, but I did. I didn't know him, but I missed him. I think that's a better way of putting it. There's a very powerful bond with your loved one. I think in some ways this can also go to people who lose a baby or somebody they didn't have that chance to build those memories, to build those relationships. It's, I had a friend, actually it was a guy I went out with when I was 30, and he had just lost his mom. And so one of my biggest things growing up my entire life, when I'd find out somebody had lost a loved one, I'm like, oh, I don't have the right to feel sad. I've got these feelings, compress. I'm just going to ignore them because they're not real. And I was talking to him a little bit, and he opened up about his mother. And I'm like, I'm so sorry. Yeah, my dad died too, but I was only 2, so I can't be sad or whatever. And he said, I have memories of my mom. I can look back on those. He's like, you have every right to grieve. And it was that moment where all of a sudden I was allowed to grieve. I was allowed to the feelings that I had had for 28 years. And that was the most healing thing anybody could have ever done for me, is let me know that I had the right to those feelings too. Because like I said, whether you want them or not, they're there. Whether you remember your loved one or not, I mean,
It's
I
something
still love
that
him.
oh,
Oh, I was just going to say, I still love him. I don't remember him, but I still love him. Anyway, sorry.
it's something that people don't realize. As I mentioned earlier, that sometimes it's not a matter of hearing the advices in terms of acknowledging the feelings and having that thing of having the fact that you are permission to grieve and And to be said, it's something that actually is in this culture nowadays, something that we are letting go of in terms of, okay, since you were saying that, since you were too young to remember him in a way, but you had that connection with him. It's something that I feel like something that we, in terms of advocates when it comes to mental health, when it comes to grief, when it comes to SARS conversation, to emphasize on. As much, no matter what people say about you, no matter what are your thoughts when it comes to grief, but also mind you that you are allowed to grieve, you are allowed to feel these emotions that you're feeling and not toss them aside. Like it's something that is bad for you. It's something that you shouldn't feel. It's something that I feel like we need to talk more about. And again, I would like to say thank you so much for sharing that with me. I really appreciate it. And it's something that's where, in terms of, I feel like that's where we actually connect with people in terms of being vulnerable, being having that emotions, expressing our emotions, and people in terms of actually go back to their lives also and realize that, okay, I am allowed to feel this emotion. Hopefully, I am not found as much as definitely there are people out there who have the same sort of you and felt the same way. Probably through this conversation, they will have that feeling. Oh, also I had that day. Also, I am allowed to do this and this and this and this. So again, thank you so much for sharing that. And earlier you mentioned complex PTSD. It's something that actually the audience might not know what it actually means. And what is complex PTSD and how does it differ from your regular PTSD?
So, I'm still learning about it, but complex PTSD is, my initial trauma was my dad being murdered when I was when I was a teeny little kid. And then that, a lot of things, and as I've met other kids that were in my same situation, I've got friends who are widows who have young kids that don't remember. There's some common threads, like they're old souls, but they're also in fight or flight. They're concerned that something's going to happen again. One of their loved ones is going to die because their loved ones die. So there's that. And so that feeling of anxiety. So that concern turns into anxiety. And I'm just kind of thinking out loud here, just kind of, just bear with me, but turns into anxiety. And when you're anxious, you're embarrassed and you feel like less of a person. And I think it's just kind of, it impacts your actions. Anxiety is a beast. It holds you back. Sometimes it moves you to action, but still I don't know of anybody that has anxiety that feels fully confident in their anxiety. You know what I mean? Is that weird?
No, it's actually
So,
not weird. Sometimes it's something also I felt in a way of why am I feeling that's the thing that I mentioned in terms of not acknowledging the emotions that you are feeling and having these, I would say, emotions that you don't understand and feel like you are the only one that you are feeling it. And something, and again, it's something that I actually felt. And I would like to go back and get into your book, which is Angel in Arlington. In terms of, can you give us a bit, a summary of the book in terms of not giving too much to the audience so that
right.
in terms of that, yeah.
Yeah. So the book is basically, it starts out in the story that I shared with you. When I allowed myself when all of a sudden that guy was like, you have every right to grieve. And it goes into me opening the door to my biggest fears, which was the Navy. I always felt an inherent distrust for them. I mean, it's my mom remarried, like I said, and I've got 6 brothers. And so I was always terrified of any of them joining the military because military equaled death to me. So I didn't trust the Navy and I was afraid of my dad's killer. Those 2 things were kind of some major things that held me back. And the book starts out at the beginning where all of a sudden I'm like, you know what, it's time for me to face this. It's time for me to stop being held back by these feelings. And it just goes into how it snowballed and how I felt my dad drive me from the other side, how I felt that connection with my dad when I allowed that to be there, to confront his killer, to confront the Navy, and to bring peace to my family. That's pretty much it in a nutshell. So it's true crime, of course, because of the murder. It's spirituality because my biggest message that I, I don't want to impose this on anybody, but I want to open it up. I want to open up the possibility that for me, the experiences that I had with my dad, I cannot explain any other way. The thoughts that I had, the things that happened, the miracles that came out of nowhere, they had to be him to me. And so I want people to know that their loved ones are there and that they can miss them and they can love them and they can still have a unique relationship, even though it's hard, even though it's painful. It also kind of, for me, facing my dad's killer, facing my dad's death, the things that I was the most afraid of, it took away the subconscious preoccupation in the back of my mind. Like, you talk about these emotions that you keep stuffing down, they're there. And then when you allow yourself to feel them, it's almost like, this is going to get really deep and really weird, but it's almost like you give them a home and they don't bother you as much anymore. You acknowledge they're there, you face them. You're like, oh, okay. This is real. It's okay. And if it comes up, you feel the emotion, and I kind of went off on a huge tangent with that, but Angel in Arlington is the story of how I felt my dad's influence helped me to solve his murder and bring out some major miracles. So.
And actually, I believe that through writing, through talking about these kinds of feelings, it really has an impact on you and impact on your mental well-being. It gives you a different perspective of what you're feeling, how you have been feeling all these years, things when you don't down. And I feel like it really helps because also I wrote a book just to jot down my feelings in terms of how I actually felt. As someone that grew up in a community that doesn't see there's something that is important. A community that didn't find enough information when it comes to mental health. Not saying enough information. Information in general when it comes to mental health is it became much difficult. So that's where I found, I won't say healing, but she wants that towards healing in terms of taking stuff. I know from experience that it really helps. There were times that I had mixed emotions in terms of writing the book, trying to figure out how should I be able to get this thing out. And for me, in all honesty, I have that thing of investment. What if I release this and people don't like it? Or people start judging me or start maybe fine with me. It's something that I realize later on that it doesn't matter. As much as I'm able to have people that different views when it comes to mental health. Something that I've learned is in general is the fact that you are not the only one that feels the same feeling. There's someone out there that still has the feeling that hurt, the feeling of not being enough, the feeling of self-worth, the feeling of just in general not being enough in a way on someone that seemed that was, I don't know how to put it though, but it's something that I felt different. I felt like I was in a change. But when I wrote the book, I was relieved, in a way, in freedom, just freedom. Actually, I can write this. Actually, I can find joy within this. I can find freedom. And it was my guide to feeling something that I've seen actually. Before I leave, in terms of I'm seeing that we're out of almost out of time. Before my last question towards you, what was your life? How has your life changed since you've come to peace with your past?
Oh my gosh, it's changed tremendously. I mean, and I want to hear more about your book, but yeah, you're right. Like writing, just being able to put yourself out there and kind of take yourself out of your own mind and be able to put your life in a story where people can see it. It's like, oh, whoa, but it's like, that was part of it is I was able to put things together and see things for a little bit more for how they really were. I still have that relationship with my dad, and I still, see PTSD as something that it doesn't go away. Anxiety doesn't go away, but you can manage it. And so it has brought me to a lot of peace. I mean, I've definitely, my anxiety has plummeted. I've got more purpose. I feel like I can see things more clearly. I got married. So it's helped me a lot. And also just even having a connection with my dad in a way where it's kind of like I was able to do what he wanted me to do, which gives me even more of a connection with him. And also, again, it's like helping people, validating their grief, their feelings through my experience, and hoping that they're able to find the same peace that I have. So
That's great to hear. And in terms of the book, it's something that I decided. In a way, it's a different thing. In a way, it's a portable, whereas I feel like I found it easier to write it down, and it's something that I always saw that poetry is something that you should rhyme, but instead of going that path, I just wrote what I felt, wrote in terms of how I felt, and actually I've received good reviews towards it in terms of my family members, my friends, and people that were close to me, and it was quite a fascinating journey to write in terms of writing, and it's something that keeps on me moving, but I have switched in terms of advocacy when it comes from the book to this podcast. Something that I'm someone that is quite vocal in terms of this conversation. I thought, why don't I start a podcast and be able to interview people like you in terms of sharing their stories and in terms of just people having that sense of belonging of actually I'm not alone. It's as much as some people know that they are not alone, but they would like to hear people who had those same experiences as they had, and realize that I can relate to them. I can actually relate to it. So with those words, I would like to say thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate your time.
Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.